Chapter 1. 800 years later. Kai Yao, I love you with all my heart. Why do you want to kill me? Zhang Ruochen loudly wailed and fell forward. Creak. He compressed the metallic bed and sat up all of a sudden. It was just a dream, he thought as he let out a sigh. He felt relieved and wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeves. Wait. No, that was not a dream. He was suspicious of what he had seen in the dream. In fact, it was hard to believe that everything he had experienced with Princess Kai Yao was just a dream. Zhang Ruochen was the only child of Emperor Ming, one of the 9 great emperors in Kunlun's field. Before his death, he was a talented warrior, sophisticated, with an incredible physical quality and thus cultivated the completion of the Heaven Realm, the highest level in martial arts, at the young age of 16. However, when he became the first person in the younger generation of Kunlun's field, he died at the hands of his childhood sweetheart and fiancée, Princess Kai Yao. Princess Kai Yao was the daughter of Emperor Qing, one of the 9 great emperors. Back in the old days, Emperor Ming and Emperor Qing were best friends. They even arranged the marriage between Zhang Ruochen and Princess Kai Yao. The childhood lovers grew up and practiced martial arts together. Zhang Ruochen was an attractive, talented young man while Kai Yao was a pretty and elegant lady. They were known as the perfect match throughout the field of martial arts. Their marriage would have been the hottest subject in the entire Kunlun's field. However, Zhang Ruochen had never expected that Princess Kai Yao would indeed put him to death. Unfortunately, he could not prevent what was going to happen to him. Now, it was 800 years later when he arose from the dead. Princess Kai Yao had lived a different life since then. She settled the incident of the 9 emperors, united the 9 empires, and built the first central empire. She even dominated the empire and became Empress Kai Yao, the backbone of the entirety of Kunlun's field. After all, the 9 emperors who once ruled over Kunlun's field 800 years ago had disappeared among the endless flow of history. The 9 emperors died and then the empress took over. Every era had its own sovereignty, and this era was no exception. The one and only emperor who conquered the region and led the kingdom was Empress Kai Yao. Why did she kill me? How could she be so cruel? Is it true that every woman in this world is ruthless? Zhang Ruochen was desperate and confused. All the suspicions revolved around Zhang Ruochen's head. His sharp penetrating eyes, heavy disconcerted heart, and a doubtful brain, but no one could help him. 800 years had passed. Everything changed except for Empress Kai Yao, who cultivated her stunning appearance and immortality. Even Zhang Ruochen's family and friends had passed away and were buried underneath the soil. Not to mention the prestigious and honorable 9 emperors, who only left over some splendid stories to be read with admiration for posterity. Creak. A fragile-looking woman who was dressed in the imperial uniform came into the room while Zhang Ruochen was lying in bed. She looked at him with concern and gently asked, "Chen did you have a bad dream again?" Concubine Lin, who was the pretty woman standing in front of Zhang Ruochen, was his mother in this life, as well as the wife of the Yunwu commandery prince. Indeed, the owner of this body had died in bed 3 days ago from an illness. Zhang Ruochen arose from the dead and appeared in this feeble body after being killed by Princess Kai Yao. Without knowing how, he brought the dead young man back to life. What a coincidence, the name of this young man was also called Zhang Ruochen. When Zhang Ruochen first arose from the dead, he was struggling to talk to concubine Lin. Somehow, in his eyes, she was just a stranger. And yet, after being around her for 3 days, Zhang Ruochen gradually realized that concubine Lin indeed thoroughly cared about him. Furthermore, knowing that he had woken up in the middle of the night frightened by nightmares, concubine Lin rushed to Zhang Ruochen's room no matter how bad the weather was. In Zhang Ruochen's last lifetime, he had never seen his mother. It seemed that his mother had died after giving birth to him. He never imagined that after being put to death by someone that he loved the most, he would have been given another chance to live again in another body and have a mother who would take care of him, to let him feel the warmth that he had never experienced. Zhang Ruochen thought, maybe she doesn't know that her own son has already been dead for 3 days. If Zhang Ruochen told her the truth, she might not be able to handle the grievous news. He would rather keep his mouth shut about it and pretend like nothing ever happened. To Zhang Ruochen, it was a 2-bird, 1 stone situation that he got to live again, and additionally, concubine Lin had her son back. Looking at the beautiful concubine Lin, Zhang Ruochen's eyes became gentle. "Mom, don't worry about me. It was just a dream," he said with a smile to his mother. The thin concubine Lin was sitting at the bedside of Zhang Ruochen, wearing a red marten fur coat to keep warm. She rubbed his forehead, looking worried. "It's the 3rd night that you've woken up with nightmares. You keep mentioning the name, Kai Yao, every time. Who exactly is she?" Concubine Lin whispered. Concubine Lin could not link this name, Kai Yao, to the First Central Empire Empress Kai Yao. In fact, Empress Kai Yao named herself the Holy Queen of Majesty and Morality, after uniting Kunlun's field and building the First Central Empire. Since then, no one dared to mention the 2 words, Kai Yao. It's nothing, Mom. You must have misheard me. Zhang Ruochen comforted his mother. Concubine Lin said with a sigh, never mention the two words, Kai Yao, again. Not even in your dreams. That was the name of Empress Kai Yao. Saying the Empress name is very impolite. If someone heard you say this, you might be subject to death. Zhang Ruochen nodded his head, pinched his fingers, and said as an apology, never again, my mother. Zhang Ruochen felt outraged knowing what Kai Yao had done to him, and noticing the fear from his mother talking about Kai Yao, he furiously made a resolution. I will be your nightmare forever after. Looking at the thin and pale Zhang Ruochen, Concubine Lin exhaled deeply and felt exceptional sorrow. Zhang Ruochen was always sick ever since he was born. Being raised in a commandery prince's family with the best doctors and medication did not help him much. He was 16 years old now, but still needed to rest in bed all the time. Perhaps this would be how he would live for the rest of his life. All of a sudden, there was a great sound of footsteps outside the palace. What are you guys doing here? Who authorized you to come and mess around the Jade Palace? Said a good-looking maidservant who wanted to stop the 8th prince from breaking into the palace. Yet she was being pushed, and she fell 10 meters away. The 8th prince was a warrior who cultivated himself to reach the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm. He could probably knock a 300-pound stone tray 10 feet with nothing but his fist, never mind a maidservant who only weighed 100 pounds. With a slight flick of his finger, the maidservant would seem as if she had been struck with a mighty force. She plummeted to the ground and, breaking her left arm, let out a wild scream. The 8th prince was wearing a golden thread dress, covered with a jade belt resting on his waist. He was muscular and strong, making every footstep steady as he walked into the Jade Palace. He stared at the court maid and said, "You're blocking my way, slave. You don't deserve to be in my presence." Behind the 8th prince, there were 6 royal guards wearing Kylan armor, tall and solid. They were all martial arts monks that excelled at their craft and were part of the royal security guards. Concubine Lin noticed the noise outside. She comforted Zhang Ruochen, closed the door, and proceeded to the Jade Palace. With a slight scowl on her face, she stood in front of the 8th prince, who was now inside the palace, and said, "This is the Jade Palace. Even though you are a prince, you still can't break in here." 8th Prince Zhangji lifted his head and stared at Concubine Lin. "The queen commands that the place of Concubine Lin and my 9th brother will now move to Zi Side Hall. From now on, the Jade Palace will belong to my biological mother, Concubine Xiao," said the 8th prince. Concubine Lin appeared slightly unsettled. She had already anticipated that this day would come but did not expect it to arrive so soon. Concubine Lin smiled sadly and said, "The queen demands us to leave the Jade Palace. Ruochen and I will move to the side hall tomorrow. I'm sorry, Concubine Lin, but my mother wants to move to the Jade Palace tonight. Please leave here right away," the 8th prince responded. Knowing that Zhang Ruochen was weak and could not bear to move around, Concubine Lin appealed to the 8th prince and said, "You know that Ruochen is very fragile, and it is getting late and colder outside now. What if?" The 8th prince sneered and exclaimed. "Concubine Lin, there are so many poor people in this world and not every one of them is worth the help. If my 9th brother is that weak, then what is the point of him staying alive? He is your brother," Concubine Lin yelled at the 8th prince. Concubine Lin was about to say something, but suddenly the door behind her opened up. It was Zhang Ruochen. Though he was weak and could barely stand, while leaning on the door, he stared at the 8th prince and said, "Don't beg for their mercy, we shall leave now." Zhang Ruochen looked sick, but his strong determination to protect his mother never wavered. "Chen why did you leave your bed? It's freezing outside. Go back to your room and stay warm." Concubine Lin was worried at the thought of Zhang Ruochen getting ill, so she immediately helped him back to his room. Zhang Ruochen shook his head firmly and said, "Mom, we don't need to beg anyone. One day, we'll be back here. We will be back in Jade Palace." Concubine Lin was touched by Zhang Ruochen's determination. She nodded her head with tears in her eyes. Concubine Lin held him and left the Jade Palace. Other than the maidservant who had broken her arm from being hit by the 8th prince, every one of the helpers had to stay for their own well-being. Everyone in the place noticed that Concubine Lin and the 9th prince had completely lost their power. There was barely any chance of them reclaiming back their power in the commandery prince's mansion. The maidservants who were working for Concubine Lin in the Jade Palace had prudently chosen to stay behind and work for the new master, the 8th prince. After being kicked out by the 8th prince, Concubine Lin and Zhang Ruochen had been relocated to Zi Side Hall. It was usual for the queens who had lost their power. It was quiet, far from the palace, and felt like it had been empty for a long time. The cold wind was bleak on this late night. Sitting on a freezing stone chair, the frail Zhang Ruochen wore a thick coat. Yet, during this frigid winter, he still felt exceptionally cold. This body is too weak. The only way to build up this body is through practicing martial arts. If I don't, even with my status as the son of the commandery prince, my mother and I will only be manipulated by others, thought Zhang Ruochen. 800 years had passed. Zhang Ruochen did not know where he would be welcome. Now that it was arranged for him to live again within this body, he did not care if it was for seeking revenge on Empress Kai Yao, or for the mother who took care of him. He needed to be strong either way. The humiliation they had suffered was all because of the weakness of Zhang Ruochen. With no resistance, he had no control over his own destiny. Even the place that he lived had been snatched away. All of this built up the motivation for Zhang Ruochen to come back as a capable man, to protect his mother and take back control of his own fate. Zhang Ruochen knew that if he wanted people to respect him and wanted a better place to live, then he needed to be a warrior, and prove to everyone out there that he was capable of being a warrior. To be a warrior in Kunlun's field, obtaining the sacred mark was the first essential step. The so-called sacred mark was the qualification given by the gods for humans to practice martial arts. People who did not open the sacred mark would never cultivate genuine qi, and hence, could never be the leader of heaven and earth. Zhang Ruochen was already 16 and still had not obtained the sacred mark. People would miss out on the best ages for cultivation after the age of 16. Even if the sacred mark had been opened after that, not a lot of achievements would be made. Both the 8th prince and Zhang Ruochen were the sons of the Yunwu commandery prince. Why did the 8th prince have a more prestigious status that allowed him to kick concubine Lin and Zhang Ruochen out of the Jade Palace? The reason was fairly simple. The 8th prince obtained the sacred mark when he was only 10. Now, he had reached the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm and became a young warrior. As long as I obtain the sacred mark, I can cultivate the scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean. With the mysteries of the scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean, I can still catch up and become a warrior of martial arts, even if I have missed the best age of cultivation. Scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean was the highest scripture that Emperor Ming had cultivated. Other than Emperor Ming, Zhang Ruochen was the only one who understood the entire technique of scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean. Tomorrow is the ceremony of worship. I hope that I can receive the qualification of the gods and open the sacred mark. Zhang Ruochen grasped his fists firmly and faithfully. He had a strong desire to open the sacred mark. After tidying up the room, concubine Lin helped Zhang Ruochen to bed and softly said, "Chen get some good rest. We need to attend the ceremony of worship tomorrow. Mom, I am sure I will open the sacred mark tomorrow. Trust me," said Zhang Ruochen confidently. "Okay, Chen I believe in you." Concubine Lin looked into Zhang Ruochen's eyes and gasped. In fact, she did not carry any hope of Zhang Ruochen opening the sacred mark. He was already 16, and it was almost impossible to open it up now. However, as a mother, she needed to encourage her child and gave him confidence. Chapter 2. The sacred mark. The Yunwu commandery was the place that Zhang Ruochen was currently living in. It was one of the thousands of commanderies in the eastern region of Kunlun's field. Commanderies were known as counties in the First Central Empire. Each commandery needed to pay tribute and tax to the First Central Empire every year. The sovereign who ruled the commandery was called Commandery Prince. The status of Zhang Ruochen in this reborn life was as the 9th son of Yunwu commandery prince. As Zhang Ruochen laid on the ice-cold, hard wooden bed, he could not stop thinking about ceremony of worship to be held tomorrow. The owner of this body hadn't yet acquired the sacred mark, by the age of 16, as if gods had abandoned him. What should I do to get a greater chance of obtaining the sacred mark? It was believed that if one wanted to acquire the sacred mark, and become a warrior in Kunlun's field, approval of the gods would be needed at the ceremony of worship. This practice was known as passing on martial arts for posterity. During the ceremony of worship, there would be a bridge linking heaven and earth with the field of spirits in Kunlun's field. It served as a means for the spirits to enjoy the oblation prepared by the sincere citizens of Yunwu. Once the spirits had finished, they decided which humans were talented enough to obtain the sacred mark. In this way, they helped the selected humans cultivate the essence of martial arts. Generally, the more talent that a human possessed, the earlier they could obtain sacred mark. In Zhang Ruochen's previous life, he had obtained sacred mark when he was still an unborn child in his mother's womb. He was a so-called born-to-be genius of martial arts. Unfortunately, he had not yet had the chance to obtain sacred mark by the age of 16 in this life. In terms of the age of cultivation, the older the person was, the less chance that they would obtain sacred mark, so to speak. Basically, he was classified as being abandoned by gods. Even though he would attend the ceremony, he was unlikely to acquire sacred mark. Zhang Ruochen could not sleep. The thought of how to obtain sacred mark spun around his head. Instead, he sat up in bed and started playing with the white, nut-shaped spinel in his hand. It was sharp at both ends and transparent in the middle without any impurities. Zhang Ruochen was curious about the white spinel. He started studying it, as if it could help him get anyone of God's approval so he could obtain sacred mark. The white spinel had meant a lot to Zhang Ruochen in his previous life. It was his 16th birthday present given to him by Emperor Ming for celebrating his transition from childhood to adulthood. Even though Zhang Ruochen did not know what the white spinel exactly was, he carried it with him all the time. He never expected that it would still be with him after 800 years. I have arisen from 800 years ago to 800 years in the future. Perhaps that has something to do with the white spinel. Zhang wondered. He closed his eyes and squeezed white spinel firmly. The image of his father, Emperor Ming, gradually appeared in his mind. He speculated on whether or not his father was still alive after 800 years. The snow fell heavily this evening in Yunwu City. The next morning, the entirety of Yunwu City was covered by layers of snow. The buildings, a Vermilion Place, and the surrounding pavilion were also blanketed with frozen coats. With all the snow, the winter solstice was always the coldest day of the year. Every year on this day, all of the warriors of Yunwu City gathered together outside Imperial Ancestral Temple and worshipped gods, led by Commandery Prince. Outside Imperial Ancestral Temple, there was an ancient altar made of rocks. Thousands of cattle, sheep, and swine were attached to the altar, as well as the massive savage beasts which were locked up around a formidable iron chain. Countless people assembled together for the same reason: the queen, concubines, princes, princesses, civil servants, and monks of martial arts, together with an enormous number of teenagers, who were waiting to obtain sacred mark. Even the infants awaited in their babysitter's arms. The entire city was obsessed with the grand ceremony. It was held in not only Yunwu City, but also in every city, every town, and every village of the Yunwu Commandery. Hey, my ninth brother. You're already 16. Even though you're attending the ceremony, you will never acquire the sacred mark. So why do you still bother to come here and embarrass yourself? Asked Zhang Ji, the 8th prince, as he giggled at Zhang Ruochen. The 6th prince stood next to the 8th prince, who put on an arrogant attitude and said, "People always say that the king gave birth to 9 children and each of them is different in their own way. Our father is such a hero. I can't believe that he produced such a piece of crap. 16 years old and hasn't obtained the sacred mark. You completely embarrass the entire royal family. What is the point of you staying alive? Why don't you go to hell?" What the 6th prince said was quite out of line. Yet, it was exactly what the other princes thought. It fully demonstrated how mean and fragile the relationships were among the royal family. In Kunlun's field, only 1 out of 10 people would be able to acquire the sacred mark. It could be said that the status of each warrior was exceptionally superior. For the superior martial arts warriors, it was certainly a different matter. The stronger blood meridians that the martial arts warriors had, the greater the chance to pass them on to their offspring. Hence, the likelihood of acquiring the sacred mark would also increase. Among the sons that the Yunwu Commandery Prince had produced, 8 of them had already acquired the sacred mark. Left behind was Zhang Ruochen, who was already 16 yet still struggling to acquire the sacred mark. He then became the joke of the royal family. Moreover, many people scorned him with an outstanding father, cowardly son status. There were even rumors in the palace saying that Zhang Ruochen was not the son of the Yunwu Commandery Prince. Being the only child who had not obtained the sacred mark, had no doubt annoyed the entire royal family. That was why all the other princes identified Zhang Ruochen as the shame of the royal family. They never treated him like a real brother and even wanted him to die. In recent years, the Yunwu Commandery Prince also started keeping a distance from concubine Lin and Zhang Ruochen. After being exiled by other concubines and princes, they had been kicked out of the Jade Palace and were moved to the side hall last night. Zhang Ruochen stood there quietly and did not say a word. He did not care about what the 6th prince and the 8th prince had said. He believed that, before you acquired any actual strength, people would only look down on you with dismay. Looking at Zhang Ruochen being marginalized, concubine Lin, who was standing with the other concubines, felt heartbroken. However, she could do nothing to help him. The ceremony of worship will now begin. The minister of the Yunwu Commandery stood at the highest part of the altar, holding a prayer roll and recited it aloud. Then, an elegant maidservant on the altar started playing 16 different types of musical instruments like bianqing, bianzhong, and bazong. That was then followed by killing the animals that had been prepared on the altar and worshipping gods with blood. PFFT. Suddenly, the rich spiritual blood turned into a thick, strong light column that went all the way up to the vault of heaven. The light column shredded the clouds and crashed into the spacious sky. A star flew in quickly from the sky and reached a 6-year-old boy's eyebrows. It blended in with the boy's body and turned into a red, sacred mark. Everyone in the crowd was so surprised and yelled. The little boy is the youngest child of General Shui. He is only 6 years old and has been given the sacred mark. The Blaze Sacred Mark is classified as the 4th class of the sacred mark. This is amazing. This little kid is going to have a bright future. The crowd continued to praise him. There were different classes of the sacred mark, from the first class to the ninth class. The first class was the lowest and weakest level while the ninth class was the highest and most powerful. Everyone stared at the 6-year-old kid with jealousy. This talented and luckiest kid, who had acquired the fourth class of the sacred mark, at the age of 6, was definitely one of God's favored son. His achievements in the future would certainly be significant. Among all the warriors in the Yunwu commandery, an excited, massive guy whooped while banging his chest. Wonderful. This is my son, Shui Liang. Everyone, you are welcome to join the celebration party at my place tonight. Ha ha. PFFT. As that sound was heard, the crowd looked up into the sky again. There were a few more stars that hit some more young boys' and girls' eyebrows. The stars turned into sacred marks, one by one. For all of the sacred marks that had been obtained this year, most of them were the lowest class. Very, very few of the teenagers had acquired the second class mark. The most outstanding candidate was still General Shui's child, who had gotten a fourth class mark. He left the people far behind, who would need to catch up to him. The people who had acquired the sacred mark were a minority. They were probably only 1/10 of the total population of Yunwu City. The lucky ones who obtained the marks were extremely overwhelmed. They were finally being granted the approval from the gods and given access to the way of making a significance in martial arts. On the other hand, those who did not obtain the sacred mark were really upset and disappointed. Some of them were even choked with tears. It could be said that laughter is heard and tears are shed in different households. The ceremony was moving toward the finish line. Zhang Ruochen had yet to acquire the sacred mark. At the age of 16 with no sign of the sacred mark, it was now almost impossible for him to acquire it anymore. Living as a normal person would be the only future that he would have in his life. Everyone in the entire family neglected him as if he was just a speck of dust hiding around the corner and no one even noticed him. At the beginning of the ceremony, concubine Lin held on to some hope. She hoped that a miracle would happen to her child, Zhang Ruochen, and he would obtain the sacred mark. She believed that he did not need to be an outstanding warrior, but he could keep himself healthier and stay away from all the illnesses. As the ceremony drew to an end, concubine Lin's hope turned to disappointment and despair. Not only concubine Lin, but also Zhang Ruochen thought that he could not obtain the sacred mark. At that moment, the white spinel that he gripped in his hands sparkled slightly. Right before the end of the ceremony, there was one more star that descended toward Zhang's eyebrows and it turned into a white circular, sacred mark. PFFT. A fierce heat burning from his eyebrows spread throughout his entire body. It's open. It's happening. Zhang Ruochen cheered. Zhang Ruochen was absolutely thrilled. He had finally acquired the sacred mark. Indeed, he did not care if it turned out to be a first-class mark. He would be more than satisfied to have finally obtained it. At one point throughout the ceremony, no one even noticed that Zhang Ruochen was there, but the moment that he obtained his valuable, sacred mark, he caught the attention of everyone. That couldn't be the ninth prince. He is 16 with a feeble body. I can't believe his luck to acquire the mark at the final moment. Most of the people could not believe what they saw and started gossiping. The eyes of the sixth prince and the eighth prince widened in disbelief, revealing shocked faces as they stood next to Zhang Ruochen. How is this possible? Concubine Lin turned around and looked at Zhang Ruochen. She finally saw the mark on his eyebrows. She ran over to him and held him really, really tight. Ruochen, you made it. You finally made it. Concubine Lin said through tears of joy. There was an old eunuch who took care of the Yunwu commandery prince that walked towards Zhang Ruochen and said, "Congratulations Concubine Lin and my ninth prince for acquiring the sacred mark. The queen wants to invite the prince over to her place. She insists to review the class of your mark personally." The queen. The smile on Concubine Lin's face froze right away, as if she realized that something was wrong. She was so nervous and she pulled Zhang Ruochen behind her. "Mom, let's go to meet the queen," said Zhang Ruochen. Zhang Ruochen recognized the subtle change of Concubine Lin. He instantly knew that the queen was a tricky person. He needed to be more conscious and careful. Chapter 3. The Yellow Realm. The queen, who wore a colorful gown and a golden phoenix coronet, sat at a tent near the altar. In Zhang Ruochen's eyes, the queen was an aged woman and yet she looked like a 28 or 29-year-old lady with an elegant and exquisite character. His Majesty has currently secluded himself for refining and, thus, I will be in charge of the ceremony this year. Minister, have you evaluated the class of the sacred mark that the ninth prince acquired yet? Asked the queen. The minister of the Yunwu commandery shook his head while he checked the metallic book in his hand. The Bible of Sacred Marks records all the marks of martial artists in Kunlun's field. From the first class to the ninth class, all the marks have been documented in this metallic book. However, none of them matches with the ninth prince's. The queen then glanced at Zhang Ruochen apathetically and said, "If there is no matching mark in the book, then I suggest that the mark you acquired carries a 0 class on it." Indeed, it has happened to warriors from other commanderies in the past. Eventually, limited achievements have been made. The eighth prince was also inside the tent. He interrupted and said, "The queen has made a good point. After all, our ninth brother is 16 now. He has missed the best age to cultivate martial arts. Even if he obtained a 4th or 5th class sacred mark, I doubt he would get anywhere." The queen nodded her head to acknowledge what the eighth prince had said. To preserve refining resources as much as possible for other warriors in the royal family, only a bottle of marrow washing liquid will be given to the ninth prince, since he only has a 0 class mark at 16 years old. Concubine Lin was shocked and her expression changed after hearing what the queen had said. "My queen, it is a fact that the first year of acquiring the sacred mark is the most significant year in terms of cultivation. Remember the year that the 7th prince acquired the sacred mark. He was given 12 bottles of marrow washing liquid in 12 months. Why does my Chen only receive 1 bottle of it?" exclaimed Concubine Lin. The 7th prince had already acquired a 7th class sacred mark when he was 3. "How dare you compare the 9th prince to such a genius?" Queen grimly responded. The 8th prince, who wanted to ingratiate himself to the queen, said, "Our 7th brother is the son of our queen, who is the first wife of the commandery prince. He has a 7th class sacred mark which ensures powerful descendants for the queen. No one is comparable with my 7th brother in the entire Yunwu commandery. Both the stability and prosperity of the Yunwu commandery in the future depends on him. Moreover, it is impossible to compare the 7th prince and the 9th prince. The fingertip of my 7th brother is 1,000 times more important than my 9th brother's life," he added. Concubine Lin bit her lip hard and continued to argue with the 8th prince. "Don't forget that when you obtained your sacred mark, you received 4 bottles of marrow washing liquid. Why can Ruochen only have 1? This is so unfair," shouted Concubine Lin. As a mother, she was trying her best to protect Zhang Ruochen and fought for what he deserved to receive. After all, the more marrow washing liquid Zhang Ruochen had, the better he could cultivate martial arts. The more talent a person has, the more resources they receive to cultivate their skills. Apparently, the talent of the 9th prince is not as significant as that of the 7th prince or the 8th prince. Compared to his outstanding brothers, surely he should get fewer resources. Queen angrily responded to Concubine Lin. "But wait," squeaked Concubine Lin, who had led the argument with the queen. However, she had truly annoyed the queen before she asked for anything. "I have already made my decision, Concubine Lin. Don't you dare challenge me again. Otherwise, I will have you beaten with a rod again," said Queen in a low voice. Again, Zhang Ruochen raised his head hearing what Queen said. He wondered if the queen had once beaten his mother with a rod. Concubine Lin shut her mouth at once when she heard what the queen had said. Concubine Lin's body shook slightly as if she was recalling some frightening memory from the past. Something that had to do with the queen and the rod. While Zhang Ruochen was trying to figure out the story behind the 2 women and a rod, a bottle of marrow washing liquid was handed to him. After taking the marrow washing liquid, Zhang Ruochen walked toward his mother who stood next to the queen said, "Mom, let's go home." Zhang Ruochen's head was still spinning about with what he had heard about the rod. He did not want to spend 1 more minute in the queen's palace. He even took a quick glance at the queen with hatred as he left. "All right." Concubine Lin pursed her lips and bitterly nodded her head. It seemed like Concubine Lin was bothered by something that the queen had said. It seemed that the queen had also noticed the tension between Zhang Ruochen and herself. She stared at Concubine Lin and Zhang Ruochen as they walked away and muttered, "Ninth prince, you had better practice as hard as you can in preparation for the year-end assessment among the royal family 3 months from now. You have to do your very best to reach the washing marrow and breaking out of the channels stage within these 3 months so you can become an outstanding warrior. By that time, His Majesty will have finished his self-refining and will attend the assessment. If you can attain that result in such a short period of time, he will be overwhelmed. Even if you gave him 3 bottles of marrow washing liquid, it is impossible to reach the washing marrow and breaking out of the channels stage in 3 months' time. Not to brag, but even with my talents, I still spent 6 months to cultivate that skill. Since my 9th brother obtained a 0 class mark from the gods, I guess he will probably need more than a year to acquire the technique." "Ha ha," the 8th prince claimed contemptuously as if he viewed Zhang Ruochen as a fool rather than a brother. Zhang Ruochen heard everything that the 8th prince mentioned about his lack of talent. He did not look back and try to start an argument. Rather, he grasped his fists firmly and thought to himself, "I will never let all of you down. You will see a completely different Zhang Ruochen in 3 months. I will obtain the washing marrow and breaking out of the channels technique." Zhang had never felt so determined. Their anger and the teasing motivated him to succeed. Zhang Ruochen could not wait to start practicing. As soon as he got back to Zi Side Hall, he instantly went back to his room and started traveling down the path to success. In fact, he did not understand what obtaining the sacred mark meant. Yet, he believed having the sacred mark would definitely help him learn how to practice genuine qi. The first step was to open up the qi pool underneath the sacred mark on his eyebrows. The so-called qi pool referred to a pool that stored genuine qi power. The larger the pool, the more storage for this power. The qi pool would also expand with cultivation and study. Generally speaking, if Zhang Ruochen wanted to develop a qi pool, he needed to cultivate it under the guidance of an experienced and elder practitioner. In regards to Zhang Ruochen, who was an exceptionally talented martial arts warrior in his previous life, establishing the qi pool was a fundamental step as well as the easiest task out of all of the steps of cultivation. In only half an hour, he had already built a qi pool. Yet, for other monks, it took them at least several days to figure out how to build a qi pool. Zhang Ruochen, the genius, only needed half an hour. However, he did not seem satisfied with the performance of this feeble body. Although I only spent 30 minutes to establish the qi pool, the size of the pool is comparable to an egg. It is definitely too small to store genuine qi. He moaned. He clearly understood that it was too small for a proper qi pool. The qi pool was a storage for genuine qi. Zhang Ruochen had to establish his own practice of meridians in order to allow the genuine qi to flow through his body. In order to become an actual warrior with the cultivation of genuine qi, the first step was to establish the practice of meridians. After that was step 2, washing marrow and breaking out of the channels. Zhang Ruochen took out the little jade bottle of the marrow washing liquid. He sniffed the liquid to make sure it was real and then poured the entire bottle of liquid into his mouth. The taste of the marrow washing liquid was relatively cool inside his throat. It only lasted for a couple of seconds, followed by a burning sensation. It felt as if there was a fire burning inside his body. With a trace of flames, Zhang Ruochen could feel the meridians merging with his body. It's time. Zhang Ruochen screamed. The first level of the scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean. For martial artists, practicing different exercises would open up different meridians. The more advanced the exercises were, the more complicated the meridians would be. Basically, there would be even more surprises when the exercises became more intricate. There were a total of 36 meridians in the scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean. Certainly, Zhang Ruochen did not need to build all of the meridians for the time being. What he needed to do was to build one path out of the 36 so he could reach the washing marrow and breaking out of the channels stage. As an extraordinary warrior, Zhang Ruochen would not be satisfied with building just one path out of the 36. The Queen and the 8th Prince all claim that I will need more than 3 months to reach the washing marrow and breaking out of the channels stage. Yet, I will prove it to everyone that I am going to complete it tonight and become a real warrior, he firmly said. With the experience of cultivating martial arts in Zhang Ruochen's previous life, a strand of genuine qi fully broke out of the vessels. Very quickly, half of the first meridian had been created. However, there was drastic pain coming from his body. It felt like his meridian was nearly being torn out. He was scared and he shivered. And, as this was just the weak body of Zhang Ruochen, anything could happen to this feeble body. If it were to happen to ordinary people, they would not be able to endure it. Yet, the powerful determination of Zhang Ruochen helped him overcome the pain. Even though he was sweating profusely, he never gave up. Just a little more, he mumbled. Zhang Ruochen was very close to the building the first meridian. He had to break through. He had to accomplish it. He had to successfully reach that stage. That was the spirit of a warrior. Zhang Ruochen flung himself toward his goal, almost crushing all of the genuine qi as he moved it toward his meridian. Boom! A massive noise descended from Zhang Ruochen's body, loud enough to make a person deaf. The shock of the noise almost made him faint. Eventually, the pain went away. Zhang Ruochen could only feel cool blood circulating around the meridians. He had never felt anything more refreshing than this. Haha, I made it. I'm a real warrior now after attaining the washing marrow and breaking out of the channels stage. He screamed. To reach this stage, the 8th prince had needed 4 bottles of marrow washing liquid and spent half a year to achieve it. Zhang Ruochen only spent a single night and only needed 1 bottle of the liquid. The washing marrow and breaking out of the channels stage had been accomplished, which meant the cultivation of the initial stage of the yellow realm. The martial arts practices were divided into yellow, black, earth, and heaven, corresponding to the yellow realm, the black realm, the earth realm and finally the heaven realm. In each realm, there were 7 more states. The initial stage, the mid stage, the advanced stage, dawn state, the medium state, the final state, and last but not least, the completion. 4 major realms and 7 minor states. The cultivation that Zhang Ruochen had completed within a night was the initial stage of the yellow realm. After building the meridians and drilling the genuine qi in the initial stage, the mid stage, and the advanced stage of the yellow realm, the power in the body would become stronger. Every time that one would elevate to the next realm, their power would greatly increase. The 8th prince had a cultivation in the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm. That explained why he could lift a 300-pound stone 10 feet in the air with a single hand. His fist was probably as strong as a bull. Most warriors in the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm were able to cultivate a technique called the strength of a bull. Above the advanced stage, there were 4 realms, which included the dawn state, the medium state, the final state, and the completion. After breaking through to the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm, a person then reached the dawn state of the Yellow Realm, which meant acquiring the technique, strength of 4 bulls, which was 4 times more powerful than the previous state. Therefore, warriors of the dawn state and the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm were like adults playing with children. Even if one of them fought against 10 people, the warrior in the dawn state could easily handle them. The other 3 minor states, the medium state, the final state, and the completion, were even more terrifying. The warriors who belonged to these 3 states were very likely to have obtained power that no one could imagine. The above realms sounded really far away to Zhang Ruochen. But, fighting firmly and steadily, he knew that this was a crucial part of this life. He believed that, if you want to go fast, go alone, if you want to go far, go together step by step. If Zhang Ruochen wanted to be a warrior, he would need to cultivate each stage gradually, step by step. The 8th prince had been practicing martial arts for 8 years and the furthest stage that he had reached was just the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm. He was just an ordinary person. The 8th prince spent 6 months to accomplish the washing marrow and breaking out of the channels stage while I only spent a single night. Zhang Ruochen was very proud of himself with the progress that he had made so far. The 8th prince spent 8 years practicing the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm. I have to reach my goal in 3 months. It's possible for me to accomplish this. With my previous experience, I can see a way, he thought, setting a target for himself over the next 3 months. The year-end assessment of the royal family would be held in 3 months' time. In order to examine the results of cultivation over the past year, every single one of the warriors in the royal family, including all the princes, princesses, and relatives, had to attend. Zhang Ruochen understood that the only way to be respected, receive more resources for cultivation, and to acquire a certain status in the royal family was no doubt by proving to everyone in the family that he was capable of being a warrior. He was determined to show them that he was no longer the coward that people used to tease. 3 months. Over the next 3 months, Zhang Ruochen was determined to practice the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm. Deep in his heart, he promised himself that he would never give up until he had redeemed his mother's dignity. A mother who had taken care of him since he was born, a mother who had suffered so much pain. Chapter 4. The mystery of time and space. During the initial stage of the Yellow Realm, the chi pool had expanded tenfold. It was almost as big as a basketball. However, the genuine chi in the chi pool was still not sufficient, as it was less than 1/10 its total capacity. It was as small as an egg. Zhang Ruochen could not practice the next level, the mid-stage of the Yellow Realm, until the chi pool was completely filled with genuine chi. He sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. The sacred mark between his eyebrows opened and he began to practice Overlord Yellow Realm, the first level of the scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean. Overflowing from the chi pool, the genuine chi circulated through his body along the meridian that had broken out. With the genuine chi circulating, he felt as if his body had melted into a vortex and was slowly absorbing the spiritual chi between heaven and earth. It flowed into the sacred mark between his eyebrows. The sacred mark transformed the spiritual chi between heaven and earth into genuine chi in the chi pool. Then the genuine chi overflowed from the chi pool and circulated in his body along the meridian. A single circle of genuine chi in the body was a complete circulation. 9 circulations passed. When Zhang Ruochen opened his eyes again, he was surprised to find that his genuine chi had doubled. It was now at 1/10 of the total capacity. If other warriors had known that their genuine chi could double like this in such a short time, they would have gone into rapture. But Zhang Ruochen was unsatisfied. It had taken 9 circulations to double his genuine chi. It was too slow. If he could obtain a spiritual crystal, his practice would accelerate and double. The exercises that Zhang Ruochen was practicing were from the scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean. His absorption rate was already faster than warriors with inferior practices. And yet, he was still not satisfied with his current progress. If he could obtain 1 spiritual crystal, he would speed up his cultivation dramatically. A spiritual crystal was a spinel formed by spiritual chi. It could be a natural spiritual crystal found in a lode under the earth or an acquired spiritual crystal hidden within the body of a savage beast. 1 spiritual crystal was worth 1,000 silver coins or so. Only princes, nobles, and masters from large families had the opportunity to obtain spiritual crystals. 1,000 silver coins were a gigantic expense, and Zhang Ruochen and concubine Lin simply could not afford it. A spiritual crystal. His heart shook intensely, and immediately the pit-shaped, white spinel he had been wearing fell off. He held it in his palm. Could this be a spiritual crystal? With genuine chi circulating in his body, the sacred mark between his glabella instantly appeared and changed into a circular halo. A streak of white genuine chi shot out from the mark into the white spinel. Crash. 4 ancient characters emerged on the surface of the white spinel. It was weird. Never had Zhang Ruochen seen such writing before. However, he managed to read the 4 characters quickly: time and space spinel. Zhang Ruochen had injected genuine chi into the white spinel in his last lifetime. However, he had failed to produce the characters. In his last lifetime, though his cultivation had been hundreds of times more powerful, he had never inspired the appearance of characters on the white spinel. In this lifetime, to his surprise, he managed to change the white spinel in the initial stage of the yellow realm. This proved that it was the nature of genuine chi, rather than its intensity, that mattered. For instance, a warrior with a flame sacred mark could better utilize a spiritual crystal that had fire nature. This could help to triple his practicing rate, while a common spiritual crystal would only double his practicing rate. In nature, 90% of spiritual crystals did not have an individual essence. Just like 90% of warriors could only unlock the sacred mark without nature. Does that mean that my sacred mark had some kind of nature that corresponds with this time and space spinel? But wait, what is the time and space spinel? As the son of Emperor Ming in his last lifetime, Zhang Ruochen was well informed and knew about many spiritual crystals with different natures, such as the flame spiritual crystal, the ice of profound spiritual crystal, the thunderbolt crystal, the blood spirit spiritual crystal, etc. But he had never heard of a spiritual crystal with a time-space nature. Time and space could not be controlled by humans at all, nor could a god dominate their development. Thus, all life should obey the rules of time and space. While Zhang Ruochen contemplated, a ring of light appeared on the surface of the time and space spinel, melting into a vortex. The vortex kept growing larger and larger, eventually enveloping Zhang Ruochen completely. Zhang Ruochen felt very dizzy as the sky and earth began to reel around him. The next second he found himself in a closed space, slamming onto the hard ground. Luckily, he had already accomplished the processes of washing marrow and breaking out of the channels. He had attained the level of the initial stage of the yellow realm, which had greatly strengthened his physique. If it had been his former fragile body, this heavy fall could have caused death. Zhang Ruochen got up from the ground, stretched his aching muscles and bones, and began to observe the surrounding space. This space was completely enclosed without any doors or windows, and it was 10 meters high, 10 meters long, and 10 meters wide. What happened? How did I get here? Where is this? There's a stone platform. There was only one single stone platform inside the space. On the stone platform, there was nothing but only a rolled-up painting and a silver iron book. Zhang Ruochen reached out for the painting first and discovered that it was unexpectedly heavy, as if it was joined to the stone. The scroll painting remained motionless, no matter how hard Zhang Ruochen tried to move it. Since the scroll painting could not be picked up or opened, Zhang Ruochen could only give up temporarily. So he turned to the thin, silver iron book instead. The Mystery of Time and Space was printed on the book. But this time, Zhang Ruochen was prepared for it. With genuine chi circulating in his body, he mobilized all his strength and opened the first page. So easy. He effortlessly managed to flick through The Mystery of Time and Space. Zhang Ruochen shook his head solemnly and stopped using the genuine chi. He picked up The Mystery of Time and Space and held it in his hands, reading carefully. The first page of The Mystery of Time and Space did not document any practicing mysterium but included the transcripts of Saint Monk Zumi, the last possessor of the time and space spinel. After reading the transcripts of Saint Monk Zumi, Zhang Ruochen had figured everything out. It turned out that Zhang Ruochen's mark was the sacred mark of time and space. According to what Saint Monk Zumi said, no one out of hundreds of millions of people could unlock it. Since ancient times, there had been only 2 people that had gotten it. And now he was the third one. Saint Monk Zumi was the second to unlock the time and space sacred mark. But based on the recorded time in The Mystery of Time and Space, he died more than 100,000 years ago. It was in the medieval ancient times, which was so long ago. The space that Zhang Ruochen was located in was the internal space of the time and space spinel. The speed that time passed in internal space was totally different from the outside world. Practicing in internal space for 3 days was equivalent to 1 day outside. Zhang Ruochen was overjoyed. He exclaimed excitedly, "Practicing in internal space for 3 days is equal to 1 day outside. That means that my practice time will be 3 times longer than others. It's perfect." Zhang Ruochen wanted to turn to page 2. However, no matter what he did, he was unable to open it. "I have failed again." Zhang Ruochen had an impulse to throw The Mystery of Time and Space to the ground. Suddenly, he found a line of small print in the last row of the first page. "Only when you attain the level of the dawn state of the yellow realm and inject genuine chi into the scroll painting can you open it." Zhang Ruochen stared at the painting again and surmised. Some mysterious exercises must be recorded in it. Perhaps it relates to the time and space of practicing. I will practice hard and try to break through to the Dawn state as soon as possible. I would like to see what secrets this painting contains. The Dawn state was the fourth small realm. Its upper levels were the medium state, the final state, and the completion. Zhang Ruochen was feeling a little hungry. He left the internal space of the time and space spinel and returned back to his room. He grasped the time and space spinel in his hands. With this spinel, he had more confidence that he could reach the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm in 3 months. Zhang Ruochen, concubine Lin, and maid Yun were sitting together for breakfast. They only had rice and steamed buns without any meat. Warriors consumed more strength than ordinary people, thus, their daily diet was of vital importance. The princes and princesses who had already unlocked their sacred marks had stopped eating a normal diet long ago and chose to eat blood pills, which were refined from the blood of savage beasts. One blood pill could replenish the physical exertion of an entire day. Even if one practiced fist techniques and sword techniques for a whole day, you would not feel hungry. Besides, blood pills also had benefits in improving spiritual blood, building up the body for martial arts and enhancing strength. If this continued, even if Zhang Ruochen ate 8 meals a day, with only rice and steamed buns, it would not be enough to supply the lost energy. Chen since you have unlocked the sacred mark, you shouldn't eat normal food anymore. Take these 10 blood pills. I'll find other solutions if you need more. Concubine Lin took out a jade vase and gave it to Zhang Ruochen. Zhang Ruochen never thought Concubine Lin would have 10 blood pills. He asked curiously, Mom, 1 blood pill costs 5 silver coins. 10 blood pills cost 50 silver coins. How did you get so much money? Concubine Lin smiled and said, there's always a way to make it. Maid Yun stood behind Concubine Lin and said, our empress exchanged her favorite gold hairpin for 10 blood pills in the pill market. Concubine Lin gave Yun a slight glance as if to blame her big mouth. Then she added, Chen it doesn't matter. As long as you can be a real warrior, I will always support you. Even if I have to sell all my jewels. Zhang Ruochen was very impressed, gripping the jade vase. He bit his lip and wanted to tell Concubine Lin that he was already a real warrior. No, he could not tell her. It had taken only 1 day for him to open up the chi pool and finish the process of washing marrow and breaking out of the channels. It was too fast. If this news leaked out, other princes and queens would definitely find ways to frame them. He was still relatively weak and needed to be more powerful. Chapter 5. Dragon and Elephant Prajnapam. With some fortitude in his eyes, Zhang Ruochen said firmly, Mother, don't worry. I will practice and become strong as soon as possible. I will protect you with my power. Taking the blood pills, Zhang Ruochen returned to his room and kept practicing. Your Majesty, it is said that a warrior not only needs blood pills but also has to practice skills. Only by practicing can the prince open up his meridians, said Maid Yun. Concubine Lin watched Zhang Ruochen leave, puckered her lips, and nodded. I know, but even the exercise of the lowest level will cost over 500 silver coins. There is no way I can afford that. What's more, the queen and the minister are in charge right now, who will never allow Chen to enter the library to practice skills. There is only one way left. Maid Yun asked, are you going to turn to the Lins? You fell out with them 3 years ago. They won't offer the chance to our prince. As long as they help Chen I will go down on my knees and beg for forgiveness. It seemed to remind Concubine Lin of something, and she could not help crying. It wasn't your fault. Maid Yun let out a sigh. Ellipsis. The spiritual chi in the internal space of the time and space spinel was very sufficient. It was almost twice as strong as that outside. In the Yunwu commentary, if the concentration of spiritual chi in one place increased by 150%, it would be seen as a treasured place and all the families would vie for it. Sitting in the center of the internal space, Zhang Ruochen took out the jade bottle. He took out a blood pill and smelled it. Blood pills were made from the blood of savage beasts, but they did not smell of blood. On the contrary, they had a delicate fragrance. When the alchemists were making them, they got rid of the smell of blood and also added tiger grass and stramonium. Long-term usage of blood pills would provide a warrior with unlimited physical strength, and improve the warrior's meridians, bones, and organs, thus making the body stronger. This is only a first-class blood pill. Zhang Ruochen nodded slightly and said to himself, a first-class blood pill is sufficient for my current cultivation. Zhang Ruochen put the blood pill into his mouth. Then he covered the bottle and put it on the stone table. Under the effect of the genuine qi, the spiritual blood of the blood pill quickly melted and provided unlimited physical strength. Although I've reached the initial stage of the Yellow Realm and become a warrior, my body is far too weak and it does not compare to others. I must strengthen my body, or else I'll suffer losses when I fight with warriors in the same realm. For a warrior, practicing only genuine qi was not enough. He also needed to practice martial techniques. Dragon and Elephant Prajna Palm. This mysterious and profound palm technique emerged in Zhang Ruochen's mind. It could be counted among the top 3 in the mysterium of martial techniques in his memories and was very suitable for him to practice right now. He widened his stance, sank his waist low, and let the genuine chi fill his legs. Then, he fixed his body, slowly raised his arms, and started to clap his hands in a mysterious rhythm. In his mind, he imagined himself as an ancient elephant with unlimited power and a magical dragon from an abyss blowing clouds. He put all his power into every single punch, as if releasing all the power in his body. Every muscle was exercised with his punches. The genuine chi went into and was integrated with his muscles and bones, making them tough and tensile. The dragon and elephant Prajnapam was a martial technique of the inferior class of the king's stage that included a total of 13 movements. Precisely speaking, the 13th movement was equal to the martial technique at the god stage. The exercises and martial technique were both divided into 5 stages: human, spirit, ghost, king, and god. The first movement of the dragon and elephant Prajnapam, galloping elephant, was as powerful as the martial techniques of the inferior class of the human stage. The second movement of the dragon and elephant Prajnapam, dragon in the sky, was as powerful as the martial techniques of the medium class of the human stage. The third movement of the dragon and elephant Prajnapam, Naga returning to earth, was as powerful as the martial techniques of the superior class of the human stage. The fourth movement of the dragon and elephant Prajnapam, dragon shape and elephant shadow, was as powerful as the martial techniques of the inferior class of a spiritual stage. The 13th movement of the dragon and elephant Prajnapam, dragon and elephant destroy the world, was as powerful as the martial techniques of the god stage, which was an unimaginable power. The earlier movements of the dragon and elephant Prajnapam could be seen as inferior martial techniques, not really that powerful. Furthermore, the dragon and elephant Prajnapam was extremely virile and hard. Thus, there were very few people who practiced it, even to the 7th movement. After the 7th movement, each additional movement used up a great deal of time and energy. If one could not resist the virile power in his body, it was very likely that he would burn to death. All of these reasons made the dragon and elephant Prajnapam a martial technique of the inferior class of the king's stage. Although the dragon and elephant Prajnapam was difficult, it was very suitable for Zhang Ruochen to strengthen his body in a short time. The first movement of the dragon and elephant Prajnapam, galloping elephant. Zhang Ruochen squatted first, and then quickly stepped out and punched. He was as still as a mountain and moved like a brute elephant. He practiced again and again until all the genuine chi in his body was used up. Then, he wiped off his sweat and fell to the ground. He used the sacred mark in his glabella to absorb the power in the internal space of the time and space spinel and turned it into genuine chi. He practiced for 9 days in the internal space of the time and space spinel, and finally succeeded in the first movement of the dragon and elephant Prajnapam, galloping elephant. Outside, only 3 days had passed, while 9 days had passed in the internal space. I wonder how powerful the first movement will be if I use it with my present cultivation. Zhang Ruochen stepped out from the internal space of the time and space spinel and went to the backyard. He stood in the center of the yard and dispersed his genuine chi to his legs. Galloping elephant. His feet moved in a synchronized pattern and suddenly dashed out. With each step, a flow of strong power charged out from his legs, then to his waist, back, shoulders, and finally, burst out from his arms. Although it was only one movement, it motivated the power of every muscle. That was the reason why it was so powerful. Bang! His palms punched a huge stone, which was about half of a man's height. He quickly pulled his palms back, repeated his footsteps, and returned to his original position. Zhang Ruochen looked at that huge stone. He saw 2 shallow palm prints on the surface, and the stone sank into the earth about 2 centimeters. Zhang Ruochen was quite satisfied with the power. Although the dragon and elephant Prajnapam was only in the inferior class of the human stage, it was much more brilliant than the others and its power was also much stronger. The higher the classes and stages are, the harder they will be to practice. If I practice the spiritual stages martial techniques directly, I can't succeed in only 9 days. It may take me at least half a year. What's more, it's impossible for me to put the martial techniques at the spiritual stage to use due to my insufficient genuine chi. The time of practicing martial techniques and other skills had to be arranged properly. If one focused on practicing martial techniques and ignored the skills, their cultivation would grow very slowly. But if one focused on practicing skills and ignored the martial techniques, he would suffer great losses during a fight. By succeeding in the first movement of the dragon and elephant Prajnapam, Zhang Ruochen finally had the basic ability to protect himself in this era. During these 9 days, Zhang Ruochen's cultivation also greatly improved. The genuine chi in the chi pool was full, and he was ready to develop his second meridian. To develop meridians, marrow washing liquid was indispensable. But the queen had only given Zhang Ruochen 1 share of the marrow washing liquid, which he had already used up when he developed his first meridian. How could he get a second, or even many, marrow washing liquid? 9th Prince, Concubine Lin has been looking for you everywhere. What are you doing here? Maid Yun saw Zhang Ruochen standing in the center of the yard. She was walking toward him with curiosity. As the only maid for both Concubine Lin and Zhang Ruochen, Yun was a pretty girl of about 17, with bright eyes and a pointy jaw. Zhang Ruochen walked up in front of her, blocking her from seeing the two palm prints on the stone, and asked with concern, Sister Yun, is your wound getting better? Yun shook her head. It probably still needs another 2 to 3 months. She had broken her arm when the 8th prince pushed her down, several days before. Hurting a maid such as her, or even killing her, meant nothing to the 8th prince, who certainly did not need to take any responsibility. In a world where the strong lead, the weak could only bleed. Zhang Ruochen asked, why don't you buy some muscles and bones regenerating ointment? Yun smiled bitterly and said, even the ointment with the lowest quality will cost 200 silver coins. A maid like me has no way to afford that. 9th prince, it is very kind of you to think of me. Now, please follow me to meet Concubine Lin. We are going outside the palace today. Zhang Ruochen followed Yun and curiously asked, going outside? Where to? To see Ningxin. You must be very happy, for you haven't seen her for a long time. Yun smiled brightly and stared at Zhang Ruochen. Every time the name Ningxin was mentioned, Zhang Ruochen's face would flush and he would look shy like a girl. Who is Ningxin? Zhang Ruochen was just about to ask when he suddenly realized he should not do so. Apparently, Zhang Ruochen surely knew the girl when he was alive and, due to Yun's attitude, they surely also had a special relationship. If Zhang Ruochen asked about who she was, he would have revealed himself. Therefore, he decided to keep silent. Fortunately, Zhang Ruochen had been ill all these years. So he hardly made contact with others, except for Concubine Lin. Otherwise, he might have already been suspected. Seeing Zhang Ruochen's calm attitude, Yun felt a little surprised. But she did not pay special attention to it and continued to walk to Concubine Lin's place. Chapter 6. Lin Ningxin Zhang Ruochen, Concubine Lin, and Maid Yun were seated in a roan antelope ancient carriage, slowly moving away from the Yunwu palace. Different from a real horse, an antelope horse was a savage beast with a horn on its head. It was like a small elephant at just over 3 meters tall and it could move 5 times faster than a normal warhorse. Some strong antelope horses could run as much as 3,000 miles per day. Without knowing how far the roan antelope ancient carriage had gone, it slowed down and finally stopped. After getting down from the carriage, Zhang Ruochen glanced at the 2 resplendent gates nearby and the horizontal inscribed board hanging above the gates, on which was written 2 powerful Chinese characters in gilded calligraphy, the Lin's Mansion. He was surprised because the surname of his mother was also Lin. Looking around the magnificent mansion, it appeared that the Lin family was not humble, but eminent. If my mother is from an eminent family, why can't she get support from her family to save herself from other concubines' continuous bullying in the commandery prince's mansion? There had to be a story behind it. Concubine Lin also got down from the carriage. Looking up at the gate, which was both familiar and strange to her, she said, Chen I bet you cannot wait to see Ningxin. Now, you have also developed the sacred mark and I believe that you and Ningxin may have many things in common. Take advantage of this opportunity. Zhang Ruochen had no idea who Lin Ningxin was. He felt that Yun's and Concubine Lin's words were strange. Led by Concubine Lin, Zhang Ruochen and Yun walked into the Lin's mansion. Theoretically, a concubine should receive a grand reception upon returning home. However, there was only one elderly butler who came to welcome Concubine Lin and Zhang Ruochen. Concubine Lin was guided into the inner house by the elderly butler, leaving Zhang Ruochen and Yun in the outer house. Only 2 maids were left to care for them. Zhang Ruochen could sense that something was off, but he had difficulty finding someone to ask. Thus, he had no choice but to remain silent. 9th prince, why don't you go see Ningxin? She must be in the drill coliseum, where all the young people of the Lin family are practicing, Yun said. Zhang Ruochen was more and more curious about this girl, Ningxin, who both Concubine Lin and Yun had mentioned several times. I might as well see her, he thought. Okay, let's go to the drill coliseum, Zhang nodded and said. It was in the inner house of the Lin family. In the quaint hall, Lin Fengxian, the leader of the Lin family, was sitting upright in Taishi chairs. He was about 30 years old with a mustache. He took a glance at Concubine Lin, who was sitting opposite to him, and said, the 9th prince is part of the future generation of the commandery prince's mansion. Even if he has unlocked the sacred mark, he should have gone to the book collection pavilion in the commandery prince's mansion to gather books about practice skills. Concubine Lin, why are you asking for them here? Concubine Lin bit her lip and said, I am not asking, but begging, my eldest brother. Could you please give Chen a book about practicing skills, even if it is only due to the fact that he is your nephew? Bang! Lin Fengxian growled with disdain as he thumped the table, saying, now you need me. How dare you come to discuss kinship with me? 3 years ago, I went to the commandery prince's mansion to plead with you. Why did not you save your nephew, Chanu? You knew that Chanu was my legitimate son and also the once-in-a-century genius of the Lin family. He would have been saved as long as you had begged the commandery prince. However, you did not. 3 years ago, Concubine Lin was extremely grieved and could hardly hold back her tears. She wanted to tell him the truth. However, Lin Fengxian interrupted her and said, just go. The family has already cut ties with you long ago. Never come back, Concubine Lin. Dong. Concubine Lin kneeled down on the ground, weeping and choking with tears, and said, my brother, how can you be so ruthless? I want to see Dad. Father has gone to Omen Ridge. He will be there for 3 months. You can't see him right now, Lin Fengxian said in an apathetic voice. One more thing. The 7th prince and Ningxin will be engaged soon. Please tell the 9th prince to stay away from Ningxin from now on. Concubine Lin was desperate and said, you know that Chen Er has been so fond of Ningxin. If he knew about their engagement, how sad would he be? Besides, why the 7th prince? Lin Fengxian said, the 7th prince opened a 7th class sacred mark when he was only 3 years old. Doesn't that mean that he is a genius? Based on his current martial cultivation, no one in his entire generation in the Yunwu commandery can catch up to him. The Lin family will benefit in the future if Ningxin can marry the 7th prince. Although the 9th prince and Ningxin are cousins who used to be childhood sweethearts in the past, the 9th prince is only mediocre. He didn't obtain the sacred mark until he was 16. That means that he will never make any great achievements in his life, and the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm may be the utmost that he can practice. He cannot compare with the 7th prince. Concubine Lin said, is Ningxin willing to be engaged to the 7th prince? Will she be happy to marry for the benefit of the family? Lin Fengxian stared at Concubine Lin and indifferently said, you are wrong. It is Ningxin herself who made the decision. Ellipsis. The drill coliseum of the Lin family was very spacious, about half the size of a football field. Young people in cyan-colored martial arts robes from the Lin family were practicing martial techniques in the drill coliseum. Some of them were practicing fist techniques, other sword techniques, and the rest, broadsword techniques. They were the elites of the Lin family and everyone had opened the sacred mark. All of them were dedicated to practicing under the guidance of a senior member in what appeared to be a flourishing atmosphere. Zhang nodded his head and said to himself, the Lin family can be thought of as a noble family in the Yunwu commandery. Suddenly, Zhang Ruochen noticed a young lady who was slim and stunning. The young lady seemed to be only 14 or 15 years old, but she had a petite body, eyebrows like willow leaves, starry eyes, and fair skin. What a pretty young lady. She was holding a sword that was covered by weak starlight and giving off a cyan-colored glow. A vast amount of sword breath surrounded her and followed her as she walked, which was as graceful as a flying swan and as beautiful as a flying dragon. The subtlety of sword technique had reached its climax. The rarefied power has been released. It's the realm of sword following the heart. Her martial arts skills have reached the medium state of the Yellow Realm, at the very least, which is much better than the 8th prince. Zhang Ruochen thought, wow, is that the 9th prince? Who would have thought that he would come to Lin's mansion? One of Lin's young followers saw Zhang Ruochen standing outside the drill coliseum and sneered with an ironic smile. He must have come here to see Sister Ningxin. What a pity, she doesn't want to see him at all. I heard that he has opened the sacred mark. Aha, he didn't open his sacred mark until 16. How can he make any achievements? If he wasn't Ningxin's cousin, he might not even have a chance to enter the Lin's mansion. I heard that Ningxin will be engaged to the 7th prince very soon. What a perfect match. Hey, it was said that the 9th prince always had a crush on her. What do you guess his facial expression will be when he learns of their engagement? All the young warriors of the Lin family stopped practicing and stared at Zhang Ruochen standing outside the drill coliseum. They pointed at him, whispered among themselves, and mocked him. Lin Ningxin also stopped practicing and glanced at Zhang Ruochen, waving her arms to precisely sheathe the splendor sword 5 meters away. Lin Ningxin walked over to Zhang Ruochen, looked at his thin body, and said, I haven't seen you for a long time, cousin. I heard that you have opened the sacred mark, right? When they were young, Lin Ningxin and Zhang Ruochen were childhood sweethearts. But later, Lin Ningxin unlocked her sacred mark and started to spend most of her time practicing, which gradually alienated her from Zhang Ruochen. After the event happened 3 years ago, she had never been to the Yunwu Palace again. Although Zhang Ruochen had been ill for years, he still visited the Lin family to see her. Even meeting her once still excited him. However, he began to see her less and less. He had not seen her for over half a year. She had always told the maid to send Zhang Ruochen away. It turns out that she is my cousin. Actually, it was the first time Zhang Ruochen had seen Lin Ningxin in this life. He felt nothing toward her. Thus, he was very calm and modestly said, I have indeed opened the sacred mark. But the queen said that it was a 0 class mark. Therefore, it can't be compared to yours. Lin Ningxian nodded, tipped her chin as supercilious as a swan, and said, "You have already turned 16. Unlocking the sacred mark may be a blessing for you. You have to work hard in your practice. Although you can't have strong martial arts skills, it can still build your body to help you be free from sickness. For you, you can at least be a normal person." Zhang Ruochen slightly frowned and nodded, saying, "I will practice as hard as I can, and do my best to catch up to your cultivation." Lin Ningxian definitely knew that Zhang Ruochen liked her. When she heard his words, she took it for granted that Zhang Ruochen still had a crush on her and wanted to go after her. "Well, cousin, my cultivation has reached the medium state of the Yellow Realm, which is very close to the final state. As for you, you may never reach the medium state. What you need to do is to practice step by step. You shouldn't make inappropriate requests and bite off more than you can chew. Otherwise, you will suffer from your actions," Lin Ningxian said with a double meaning. Zhang Ruochen wrinkled his brows even harder. Lin Ningxian sympathetically looked toward Zhang Ruochen and said, "Cousin, one more thing. I hope that you won't be too sad. In 3 months, I will be engaged to the 7th prince when the commandery prince completes his refining. It will be interesting. Hee hee." All the young warriors of the Lin family were amused by this. They turned their eyes, one after another, to see what Zhang Ruochen's reaction was to her words. Chapter 7. Sacred Sword Skill. Without any obvious emotion, Zhang said coolly, "Congratulations, we're doubly related from now on." After saying these words, Zhang Ruochen turned his back and walked away. Zhang Ruochen was not interested in his beautiful cousin during their first meeting. He felt it was boring to talk with an uncongenial person, so he left after a moment. Seeing that Zhang Ruochen had shown no reaction, the young warriors in the Lin family were all greatly disappointed. How could it be? Lin Ningxian felt a bit frustrated with the indifferent look that had been on Zhang Ruochen's face. She stared at his back and full of resentment she said, "Don't you want to know the reason?" Zhang Ruochen had no interest in knowing who would get engaged to Lin Ningxian. Since she insisted on telling the details though, Zhang Ruochen stopped and gently nodded his head. "I will be present during your engagement ceremony to offer my congratulations. Now I'm going to see my mom, if there's nothing else." He had hardly finished his words when Zhang Ruochen saw that concubine Lin had come out of the courtyard of the Lin's mansion. It was obvious that concubine Lin had just been crying. Although she had dried her tears, Zhang Ruochen was quick to notice this upon seeing her red eyes. Zhang Ruochen rushed to comfort her and asked with concern, "Mom, what happened? Is there someone bullying you?" Shaking her head, concubine Lin said, "I'm fine, let's just go back." There must be something wrong, judging by that look on concubine Lin's face. After meeting Lin Ningxian, Zhang Ruochen had lost his last good impression of the Lin family. And after seeing concubine Lin's expression, Zhang Ruochen was even more disappointed in the Lins. "Wait." Lin Fengxian folded his hands behind his back and walked into the courtyard. Flashing a look at Zhang Ruochen, he pulled a scroll of Fel Ancient Classics from within his sleeve and said, "This is a set of practice skills called the Te formulas of the inferior class of the human stage, which could open up 7 meridians, through which vital energy can circulate. Take it and practice it. Even though it is not an advanced practice skill, at least it might help you to complete washing marrow and breaking out of the channels. It should be sufficient for you." Earlier, Lin Fengxian had ordered 2 bottles of marrow washing liquid, and said coldly, "After all, we share the same blood meridians of the Lin family. Take 2 bottles of marrow washing liquid with you." Concubine Lin gazed unwaveringly at Lin Fengxian with grateful eyes. Immediately, she held Zhang Ruochen's hand and said, "Chen, thank your uncle quickly." Seeing Lin Fengxian's almsgiving manner, Zhang Ruochen felt disgusted. It was no wonder that his mother's eyes were red from crying. She must have been humiliated when she begged him for a roll of practice skills. "We don't need handouts from the Lin family. Mom, let's go." Zhang Ruochen did not even look at the practice scroll or take the marrow washing liquid from Lin Fengxian as he took concubine Lin's hand and left the Lin's mansion. He should be ashamed of himself. He did regard himself as the prince. The younger warriors in the Lin family all sniffed and sneered at him. Lin Ningxian looked at the teenager who resolutely left the Lin's mansion and felt very surprised. She had the feeling that her once coward cousin was a bit different now. Now that he's obtained the sacred mark, he's naturally become a little unyielding. But he doesn't know that opening the sacred mark at 16 years old means that he has passed the golden age for practicing martial arts. Why am I thinking so much? We're destined to belong to 2 different worlds anyway. Lin Ningxian sighed and returned back to the drill coliseum and continued her practicing. After leaving the Lin's mansion, concubine Lin said, "Chen, you're too impulsive. If you can be a warrior and build strength through martial arts, it's okay for me to suffer all of these wrongs." Standing up straight, Zhang Ruochen turned around and stared at the golden horizontal inscribed board that was inscribed with Lin's mansion. Then he said decisively, "Mom, don't worry. I can still become a warrior even without the help of the Lins, and I'll be the superior one among the warriors. Concubine Lin sighed slightly and refrained from saying anything. Suddenly, she realized something and said, Chen have you heard that Ningxin will get engaged to the 7th prince? Don't be sad. Zhang Ruochen smiled and said, Mom, don't worry. There are so many good girls in this world, and some of them are even better than Lin Ningxin. I am glad to hear you say that. Concubine Lin smiled with relief. Back at the Yunwu Palace, Zhang Ruochen took a blood pill and entered the internal space of the time and space spinel. Then he started practicing his dragon and elephant prajna again. He sat down and had a short break once he had exhausted himself practicing. All the humiliation that Mom has suffered from the Lin family, I'll pay them back double that amount. What on earth had happened 3 years ago? It seems that I shall find an opportunity to ask Yun. Of course, my primary goal now is to reach the mid-stage of the Yellow Realm as soon as possible. To break through to the mid-stage of the Yellow Realm, one had to drink the marrow washing liquid. It would cost him at least 200 silver coins for one bottle of marrow washing liquid. That was not a small amount for Zhang Ruochen. And his practice was the scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean. It was obvious that one bottle of marrow washing liquid was not going to be sufficient if he wanted to break through to the mid-stage of the Yellow Realm. I got it. While tapping his forehead, Zhang Ruochen was filled with self-pity as he realized that he had wasted too much energy on earning silver coins, forgetting that he actually owned a huge treasury. After all, his last lifetime was spent as the son of Emperor Ming. He once performed many high-level exercises and martial art techniques and kept it all in his mind. He could choose one practice skill and martial technique at will to sell at a high price. Scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean, and the dragon and elephant prajna were at a holy level in the entire Kunlun's field, and certainly, could not be sold. Tucked into his memories were some other low-class exercises and martial techniques. Any of which would surely cause quite a stir in the Yunwu commandery. Zhang Ruochen immediately got some paper, a pen, and an inkwell. He then wrote down a set of spiritual stage martial techniques for the sacred sword skill. The sacred sword skill was the lowest level martial technique in Zhang Ruochen's memory. Low class of spiritual. The martial technique for the low class of spiritual techniques would rank as the top technique in the Yunwu commandery. Even for a large family like the Lins, their strongest technique would be of the low class of spiritual, and would take 1 or 2 sets, at most, as the unique techniques of the family. It was common knowledge that many warriors did not have opportunities for practicing martial techniques in the Yunwu commandery. For them, it was an amazing treasure even if it was an inferior class technique of the human stage. The cheapest inferior class technique of the human stage would cost at least 300 silver coins, while some of the best inferior class techniques of the human stage would cost more than 1,000 silver coins. This price was too high for ordinary martial arts cultivators to afford. Some warriors even risked their lives and fought with others in order to get the inferior class techniques of the human stage. As for the martial techniques of the low class of spiritual, once they were sold, even the leader of those large families would be interested and would want to buy them at all costs. Their family's strength would advance a lot with one more martial technique from the spiritual stage. Finishing writing the practice method of the sacred sword skill, Zhang Ruochen also drew some small pictures for one move of the sword technique on the paper. Zhang Ruochen made some genuine qi by condensing the pen tip. Combining genuine qi with the martial arts comprehensive state allowed him to draw the sword movement picture. Inside, his genuine qi had been depleted, and that was only one finished picture. Zhang Ruochen sat with his legs crossed and immediately started practicing. He made his qi pool and filled it with genuine qi and then he began to draw the second picture. It took him half a day to finish drawing the 12 pictures of the sacred sword skill. Even though his cultivation was gone, his comprehension of martial arts and his eyesight were still good. Each sword technique he drew was very exquisite. There were no differences when compared with the initial sword movement picture of the sacred sword skill. According to my knowledge of martial arts, drawing the martial technique of the low class of spiritual is the limit. If I were to draw a picture of the mid-class technique of the spiritual stage, perhaps I just could draw 1/3 of its comprehensive state. This rare book of a martial technique could not be easily copied or made monotype. It was unsound for ordinary people to write down the formulas and copy the pictures of the sacred sword skill. Even if they succeeded in practicing the sword technique, it was impossible for them to reach the power of the low class of spiritual sword technique. Zhang Ruochen was the strongest at performing the completion of the heaven realm in his last lifetime. But he only could draw the essence for the low class of spiritual sword technique. As for a martial technique of a superior level, he could not draw all of its essences. The sword technique of the low class of spiritual should sell at a good price. Instead of taking the sword technique of the sacred sword skill to the martial market right away, Zhang Ruochen walked toward the palace gate while it was dark. "Ninth Prince, why are you here so late?" 2 royal security guards inquired. The 2 royal security guards also knew that the 9th prince and concubine Lin had been evicted and lived in a side hall, which meant that they had lost power and influence within the palace. So their expressions did not look deferential, and they did not even salute Zhang Ruochen. Zhang Ruochen was not the same coward Zhang Ruochen from the past. He stared at the two royal security guards with sharp eyes, stuck out his chest and said, I have to go into the Lin's mansion and find my cousin, Ningxin. Can you open the gate right away? After all, Zhang Ruochen was nobility. The two royal security guards could not really deny him. They opened up the gate and watched Zhang Ruochen go out. Is there anything to be proud of? If he wasn't the son of the Yunwu commandery prince, he'd have died many times over. One of the royal security guards scornfully commented. It's said that the genius girl, Lin Ningxin, will get engaged to the seventh prince. But he hasn't given up, and that's so stupid, the other royal security guard said disdainfully. Zhang Ruochen did not actually intend to see Lin Ningxin, he just used it as an excuse to get out of the palace and avoid suspicion. While walking out of the palace, Zhang Ruochen took a loose black cloak out of the time and space spinel and wrapped it around his body. He then went into the street of Yunwu City among the integrating lights. In the dark cape, nobody could see his face clearly. Not long after, Zhang Ruochen walked through the thriving streets and entered into the martial market. Other places in Yunwu City were only referred to as the tawdry places. The martial market only occupied 1/10 of Yunwu City, but it was the most prosperous one there. The martial market itself was divided into 5 areas: the pill market, weapon market, beast market, slave market, and central auction. The martial market determined the ups and downs of the Yunwu commandery to some extent. So the commandery was strict with its management. Each point of entry into the martial market was guarded by sergeants. Only warriors or nobility had the qualifications to enter into the martial market. Chapter 8. Martial market. Upon entering the martial market, Zhang Ruochen went directly to the central auction. Average shops could not afford low class of spiritual martial techniques. Only when they were sold at the central auction could Zhang Ruochen maximize their martial technique value. Just after Zhang Ruochen walked into the auction house, a beautiful maid, who was dressed neatly, sauntered over to him. Without showing any amazement from seeing him in mysterious clothes, she asked politely, Sir, can I help you? I'm looking forward to meeting the superior deacon of the central auction. Zhang Ruochen had changed his tone into a low and thick pitch, sounding like he was a 30 or 40-year-old middle-aged man. Who on earth is this guy? Wanting to meet the superior deacon when he had just arrived. He should be taken seriously. I'll tell the superior deacon, however, he is usually busy receiving VIP customers. I am afraid that he will have no time to receive you. Could you please wait for a moment? After informing him, the maid walked through a big gate and went to inform the superior deacon. Zhang Ruochen was not in a hurry and just waited in the lobby quietly. Before too long, the maid returned through the gate with a plump elder who was wearing a gorgeous robe. She pointed in the direction of Zhang Ruochen and said, That's him, Mr. Superior Deacon. The superior deacon glanced at Zhang Ruochen, who was still shrouded in his black cloak, and from far away, the deacon fixed his eyes on Zhang Ruochen's feet. His wrinkled eyes squinted slightly, lightening with a shrewdness. The pair of boots Zhang Ruochen wore were called Kylan gold-gilded boots, and only the people in the royal palace had the right to put them on. Zhang Ruochen showed off his boots deliberately because, after all, he was intending to auction a sword technique of the low class of spiritual, which was inevitably coveted by other people. He had no ability to protect the sword technique with his present martial cultivation. If people recognized him as worthy of royalty, few would dare to question him. It was necessary for him to pretend that he was powerful and to frighten others, especially since he was actually not powerful. He has an uncommon background. The superior deacon thought to himself when he looked at Zhang Ruochen's boots. Suddenly, the superior deacon's attitude changed, and he respected Zhang Ruochen as if he were royalty. He walked in front of Zhang Ruochen and said in a humble voice, Your Excellency, this way please. Okay. In order to impress him, Zhang Ruochen nodded and put his hands behind his back, pulling back his shoulders and reaching his full height. The warriors in the lobby saw the attitude of the superior deacon and they speculated about what great figure had come to the central auction. Arriving at the 3rd floor of the central auction, Zhang Ruochen sat in the highest position comfortably and took a teacup that was offered by a maid. With a condescending tone, he said, I have a treasure that I intend to auction here. Please call in your most trusted appraiser to appraise it. Having seen Zhang Ruochen's great attitude, the superior deacon further convinced himself that this guy was a key person in a royal palace, so he called in the appraiser promptly. After a short while, a gray-haired old man walked in. He looked like he was at least 70 or 80 years old, with a pair of bright piercing eyes. To his surprise, he found himself unable to figure out Zhang Ruochen's cultivation. Immediately, the elder bowed to Zhang Ruochen respectfully and said, I'm the appraiser for the central auction. Where is the treasure, Your Honor? There were 3 kinds of situations where someone could not figure out someone else's martial cultivation. Firstly, if the other person's cultivation was higher than your own. Secondly, the practices of other person's exercises were more brilliant than normal ones. For example, warriors who practice the human stage exercises generally were unable to see the cultivation of warriors who practice the spirit level exercises. They could only guess at the other person's cultivation by details and aura. Definitely, if sharing similar exercise levels, people who had a higher cultivation could still outguess the martial cultivation of those lower. And thirdly, was when the other person possessed a treasure that hid his or her cultivation. The second and third cases were uncommon. Therefore, instinctively, the elder treated Zhang Ruochen as the first case, thinking that Zhang Ruochen's cultivation was higher than his own, so he saluted him respectfully. It just so happened that Zhang Ruochen practiced Scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean, which was equipped with profound exercises. Nobody in the entire Yunwu commandery could see through his martial cultivation unless he showed his inner meridians intentionally. Moreover, in his previous life, Zhang Ruochen was superior and reached the completion of the heaven realm. Despite being reborn in a commoner's flesh in this life, Zhang Ruochen's understanding of martial arts and soul carried over with his vital essence into this life. Only when one's martial arts realm was higher than the completion of the heaven realm could one figure out Zhang Ruochen's cultivation. Inside his sleeve, one of Zhang Ruochen's hands touched the time and space spinel. He reached into the internal space of it, grabbed the pithy formula of the sacred sword skill, and handed it over to the elder. I would like to auction this sword technique of the low class of spiritual, said Zhang lightly. Hearing what Zhang Ruochen had said, the chief appraiser was greatly surprised when he just handed over the pithy formula of the sacred sword skill. He immediately unfolded the paper scroll and carefully examined it. The superior deacon, who had been standing to the side, quickly walked over to consult with the appraiser. Both the chief appraiser and the superior deacon were martial arts masters, so they soon came to a decision and nodded together. This is an authentic pithy formula of a low class of the spiritual sword technique. And I'm wondering, how many sword movements have you acquired? Asked the superior deacon. Only through combined formulas with the sword movement, could the sword technique of the low class of spiritual wield its real power. Even if the superior deacon and the chief appraiser were to bear the pithy formulas of the sacred sword skill in mind, without the combination of sword techniques, it was useless. Zhang Ruochen said, the entire sacred sword skill covers 12 of the sword techniques. The first edition has been lost for a long time. This sacred sword skill that I have was drawn by a superior in the heaven realm, and the sword techniques in it are no different than the first edition. The chief appraiser meditated for a moment and said, in that case, the starting bid for the sacred sword skill would be 200,000 silver coins. But, as a prerequisite, the buyer can verify these are the real low class of spiritual sword movements, otherwise, the auction will fail. While nodding, Zhang Ruochen said, all done according to the rules of the auction house. As the most high-profile and outstanding item, this sacred sword skill could be auctioned tonight. Before starting the auction, the central auction would inform all of the major families in Yunwu City as soon as possible. Carrying great fortunes, they would all come to the martial market at the planned auction and bid on this of low class of spiritual sword technique. Zhang Ruochen cared more about the results rather than the process. The auction took about 4 hours and the final results were known. Eventually, the sacred sword skill was bid on by the Lin family leader and was won at the high price of 1,240,000 silver coins. The Lin family. Zhang Ruochen was amazed when he heard the result. Before long, led by the superior deacon, Lin Fengxian, the head of the Lins, Linda, an elder uncle of Lin, and Lin Ningxian, one of the 4 most beautiful girls in the Yunwu commandery, walked in from outside. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the seller of the sacred sword skill. The superior deacon announced with a big smile, pointing at Zhang Ruochen, who was sitting in the highest position. Observing his Kylan gold-gilded boots, Lin Fengxian nodded and bowed slightly and then said, I'm Lin Fengxian, the head of the Lins. May I know your name, sir? Before entering, Lin Fengxian had received a description of this mystery man from the superior deacon, knowing that he could be an important person in the royal palace with a remarkable background. Thus, as the head of the Lin, he was in the lower position. He was concerned that he would be identified by Lin Fengxian and Lin Ningxian, thus Zhang Ruochen decided to behave more cautiously. He cleared his throat and spoke low, there is no need to know my name. Here are the pithy formulas of the sacred sword skill and the sword movement pictures, please verify them. He took them out of his sleeve and placed them on the table. Lin Fengxian did not inspect the formula since he trusted the central auction had already done their job carefully before auctioning off the item. He spread the sacred sword skill scroll out on the table, and they saw 12 sword movement pictures in total, each portraying an image of a human practicing with a sword. Ordinary people would not be able to identify the special markings in them. However, to Lin Fengxian, the 12 features appeared to be alive as they were practicing with their swords. Every sword technique was exceptional and they showed a profound martial arts comprehensive state. Even one move could have unlimited benefits. This series of sword techniques are top class. What a worthwhile purchase. Lin Fengxian exclaimed with excitement. Chapter 9. The truth of 3 years ago. Great. It's indeed swordsmanship of the low class of spiritual. Furthermore, it has sword movement graphics drawn by a predecessor from the heaven realm. With a smile on his face, Lin Fengxian put the code and the graphics of the sacred sword skill away immediately. It was terrific. The Lin family's foundation would become much stronger with this sword technique of the low class of spiritual added to its collection. The superior deacon walked over to Zhang Ruochen and said, Master, the sacred sword skill was sold for 1,240,000 silver coins at auction. Minus the 12,000 silver coins paid to the auction, you will receive 1,228,000 million silver coins in the end. Would you prefer to exchange them for spiritual crystals, or blood pills, or deposit them in the Martial Market Bank? When ordinary people traded, they usually used copper, silver, or gold coins. However, when warriors traded with each other, they generally used blood pills or spiritual crystals. Zhang Ruochen said, deposit 1,200,000 silver coins in the Martial Market Bank, and exchange 20,000 silver coins for spiritual crystals, then give the remaining 8,000 silver coins to me. An hour later, the superior deacon gave a card made from a yellow spinel to Zhang Ruochen and said, Master, this is the 3-star VIP card of the Martial Market Bank. The 1,200,000 silver coins have been deposited in it. A VIP card was a symbol of identity, and few people in the Yunwu commandery had the 3-star VIP card. Owning a 3-star VIP card meant that your wealth was above 1 million silver coins. Then, the superior deacon gave a package containing 20 spiritual crystals and 8,000 silver coins to Zhang Ruochen. Zhang Ruochen picked up the package and walked out of the central auction without saying a word. This guy's back looks so familiar. Lin Ningxian stared at that dark shadow walking away and had a familiar feeling in her heart. Lin Fengxian said, I felt that familiar feeling a bit, too. Maybe I've seen him in the palace. This is not an ordinary guy. Maybe his true identity is a little scary. Lin Ningxian asked curiously, why do you say that, Daddy? Lin Fengxian said seriously, the ink of the sacred sword skill is still wet, which means that the graphics were drawn today, but anyone who could draw the sacred sword skill must be a superior of the heaven realm. That means that this guy is either the superior of the heaven realm or has a connection to a superior of the heaven realm. Either way, we can't afford to offend him. A superior of the heaven realm. Lin Ningxian was shocked, and she said, it seems that even Grandpa has not yet reached the heaven realm. Lin Fengxian nodded, with some longing in his eyes. There were 4 realms in martial arts: the Yellow Realm, the Black Realm, the Earth Realm, and the Heaven Realm. The Heaven Realm referred to the Acme realm of martial arts, full of martial arts legends. A man from the realm of heaven could confront an army of 100,000 alone. They were the truly superiors. When someone surpassed the Heaven Realm, they no longer belonged to martial arts, or even to the mortal body. Their capabilities were beyond normal warriors' imaginations. Lin Ningxian said, there shouldn't be many superiors of the heaven realm in the palace. Maybe if we tried to, we could find out who he was. Lin Fengxian's face became austere and he said, don't do such a foolish thing. The Lins will pay a heavy price if we offend a superior of the heaven realm. With sparkling wisdom in her eyes, Lin Ningxian said, I have a question, Daddy. Since he is someone important in the palace, he wouldn't have run short of silver coins. So, why did he sell a spiritual stage sword technique at auction? Lin Fengxian thought carefully for a while and said, there are 8 martial arts of the royal family, which are all famous, but the sacred sword skill wasn't one of them. We'd better not investigate it. The Lin family can't afford to offend a superior of the heaven realm. Shan, you have the sacred mark of sword technique. Thus, you are the best candidate to practice this sacred sword skill. You will definitely shine among the young nobles in the year-end assessment if you can practice the first art of sword techniques successfully within 3 months. Zhang Ruochen walked out of the martial market after leaving the central auction. He made a detour in Yunwu City and found a hidden spot to take off his black cloak and Kylan gold gilded boots. He put them into the time and space spinel, then put on a pair of ordinary cloth shoes. He looked just like an ordinary young warrior in this garb. Now, no one will recognize that I was the mystery man who just sold the sacred sword skill at auction. Zhang Ruochen walked into the martial market again to purchase the items that he needed, holding the parcel with spiritual crystals and silver coins in it. First of all, he spent 4,000 silver coins on 20 potions of marrow washing liquid. Then, he spent another 1,000 silver coins to buy 200 pellets of blood pills. According to his current cultivation, first-class blood pills were quite sufficient. 200 first-class blood pills could support him for half a year. Later, he bought the other 2 medicines that could increase his cultivation: refining powder, and energy pills. Both of them were very expensive. Even the genius disciple of the great families could not afford such treasures when they were at the initial stage of the Yellow Realm. But for a wealthy man like Zhang Ruochen, as long as it could increase his cultivation quickly, he would be willing to spending as many silver coins as he had. Finally, he spent 5 spiritual crystals on 5 doses of refining powder. Another 10 spiritual crystals on 10 energy pills. He also bought muscles and bones regenerating ointment for Yun for 500 silver coins. Apart from the 1,200,000 silver coins that he kept in the Martial Market Bank, he had 5 spiritual crystals and 2,500 silver coins with him. Zhang Ruochen returned to the palace again after he stored all the pills he just bought into the time and space spinel. Sister Yun, this is the muscles and bones regenerating ointment that I bought for you. It will help your arm heal quicker. Zhang Ruochen took out an elegant ebony box and gave it to Yun. Yun seemed a little shocked for a moment. Then a bit nervously, she took the ebony box and opened it. It immediately exuded a fragrance of the medicine that was inside. She felt grateful and surprised at the same time and asked, Ninth Prince, where did you get the silver coins for the muscles and bones regenerating ointment? It was common knowledge that the muscles and bones regenerating ointment of the lowest quality cost 200 silver coins. The better one even cost 500 silver coins. Zhang Ruochen smiled and said, Sister Yun, I have some secrets that I can't tell you right now. I hope that you can keep a secret for me. Yun stared at Zhang Ruochen deeply and nodded. She whispered, May I tell concubine Lin? Not now, Zhang Ruochen said. Well, you have my word. Yun held the ebony box in her hand tightly and felt relieved inside. Since the 9th prince could spend hundreds of silver coins to buy her muscles and bones regenerating ointment, he certainly had great opportunities. Maybe the 9th prince would become a superior of martial arts in the future. Zhang Ruochen asked, There is one thing that I can't understand, and I hope Sister Yun can tell me the truth. My mother is the sister of the head of the Lins. Why did she break off all relations with the Lins? What happened 3 years ago? Yun sighed and said, Since you were always sick and weak, and couldn't stand the shock, it was kept a secret. But you have opened the sacred mark now, so I'll tell you. You should remember Lin Chanu, the top genius of the Lin family. He is your cousin, and also the eldest son of the head of the Lins. He practiced to the completion of the Yellow Realm when he was just 17. But 3 years ago, Lin Chanu offended another genius, a greater genius than himself. His legs were broken by that genius, and he was sent to the celestial prison. How did that happen? Zhang Ruochen asked. The Lin family counts as one of the top great families in the Yunwu Commandery. Who would dare to send the top genius of the Lin family to the celestial prison? Could it be that the genius offended by Lin Chanu had an extraordinary background? Yun nodded and said, Yes. Lin Chanu offended the 7th prince, the most shining star in the Yunwu Commandery. Compared to the 7th prince, all other geniuses mean nothing. I see. Zhang Ruochen nodded. He finally understood. Yun continued, the head of the Lins came into the palace at once to beg concubine Lin after Lin Chanu was sent to the celestial prison. He had hoped that concubine Lin could ask the commandery prince for a favor. He would pay any price if only he would spare Lin Chenu's life. Naturally, concubine Lin went immediately and asked to meet the commandery prince, but she was blocked by the queen. They had an argument about it. In a fit of rage, the queen sentenced concubine Lin to be flogged 30 times as punishment. Concubine Lin was covered in blood and nearly died when the punishment was over. Bang! Zhang Ruochen smacked the pillar with his palm, biting his teeth, and said, Did the Yunwu commandery prince just let it go without even caring? Yun said, You should understand that the 7th prince was the most talented of the commandery prince's 9 sons. The commandery prince loved him deeply and had great expectations for him. Commandery prince did a thorough investigation and found out it was totally Lin Chenu's fault, who nearly killed the 7th prince. The Yunwu commandery prince flew into a rage because of this. He thought that concubine Lin was unreasonable to even think of asking a favor for Lin Chanu, a man who had made such a huge mistake. The Yunwu commandery prince used to love concubine Lin very much, but after that, he treated her more coldly. Yun continued, the Lins didn't understand the suffering that concubine Lin had undergone. They didn't dare to blame the queen or the 7th prince, so they blamed concubine Lin for all of it. In their opinion, they lost a top genius just because concubine Lin didn't ask the commandery prince for a favor. The Lins cast concubine Lin out, and have dissociated with her completely since then. Zhang Ruochen took a deep breath. He felt bitter about the unfair treatment concubine Lin had suffered. He clenched his fist and hit the pillar again. With a deep voice, he said, Power. Without great power, you can't survive in this world. You can't get fair treatment. Chapter 10. The graph of 36 meridians. Zhang Ruochen thought for a while and then asked, Has Lin Chanu been executed? Not yet. Do you think that the 7th prince would let it go just like that? Said Yun. Lin Chanu was sentenced to castration and became a eunuch. He was also made a slave by the 7th prince. Zhang Ruochen replied, The top genius of the Lins is now a eunuch, and was even made a slave of his enemy. This is simply a great humiliation for the Lins. Yun frowned and said, but I don't get it. Since the Lins were humiliated so badly, why does their leader still want to marry their daughter to the seventh prince? Zhang Ruochen answered, it's easy to understand. With his talent, the seventh prince will succeed to the throne and become the lord of the Yunwu Commandery. The Lins have to repair the relations between their families. An arranged marriage is the best choice. Secondly, since the Lin's top genius has become a servant of the seventh prince, the relations between them may not be as bad as we thought. Perhaps this arranged marriage between Lin Ningxian and the seventh prince is a plot cooked up by Lin Chenu. Staring at Zhang Ruochen, Yun could not believe that the ninth prince could analyze all of these situations in such a clear way. Instead of acting like that cowardly boy, he gave off a sense of tact and sagacity. It seems that the sacred mark has changed all that for him since its opening. Yun thought, if concubine Lin learns of this, she would be delighted. After going back to his own room, Zhang Ruochen entered the internal space of the time and space spinel right away. Now, it's time for me to open up the second meridian. Zhang Ruochen opened the jade bottle and drained all of the marrow washing liquid. Under the potency of the marrow washing liquid, all of the blood inside of his body felt as if it was boiling. Using the great potency, Zhang Ruochen immediately started to open up the second meridian following the instructions in the scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean. The more meridians that one opened, the faster the spiritual qi would be absorbed and the faster the running speed of genuine qi inside his body would be. The more meridians that were inside one's body, the stronger one's body would be for martial arts. In the same realm, he could break out a stronger fighting force. With the help of his past practice experience, Zhang Ruochen soon opened up the second meridian and the genuine qi also ran faster than before. The qi pool hasn't expanded, and I didn't make it to the mid-stage of the yellow realm. I must open up another meridian. Zhang Ruochen took a blood pill and regained his strength. After resting for about an hour, he got back in the groove, drank another bottle of marrow washing liquid, and started to open up the third meridian. After opening up a new meridian, other monks would have had to recuperate for 1 to 3 months, usually to increase the tenacity and activity of their meridians, before they started to open up the next one. However, Zhang Ruochen could not wait a month. He eagerly opened up his third meridian immediately to challenge the mid-stage of the yellow realm. Doing it this way more than doubled the difficulty. I can make it. I have to make it. By tonight, I will be in the mid-stage of the yellow realm. Holding a spiritual crystal, Zhang Ruochen absorbed the spiritual qi inside the spiritual crystal while removing all of genuine qi in his body, and pushed forward to the third meridian furiously. Bang! A thud came from the glabella on Zhang Ruochen's forehead. His qi pool, which was once only as big as a basketball, immediately expanded tenfold and became as big as a vat of water. It looked just like a bathhouse pool, which was about 1 square meter in diameter. Now, his qi pool would be regarded as a real qi pool. This is the cultivation of the mid-stage of the yellow realm. This is just the very beginning of the mid-stage of the yellow realm. I don't have much genuine qi left inside. Of course, I can progress now. If I fill my qi pool through practice, the genuine qi inside my body will be expanded by 10 as well. Zhang Ruochen felt so excited for making his great martial cultivation progress. The qi pool would also be expanded with a new higher realm, which of course, could hold more genuine qi. If one could not break through to a new realm, his genuine qi would never increase, even with 10 years of practice. That was because the capacity of the qi pool was fixed for each realm and it could only hold a certain amount of genuine qi in reserve. At the mid-stage of the yellow realm, impurities from inside the body were carried out of the body through the pores. The impurities looked like a layer of black slime and gave off a slight odor of rotten fish. Zhang Ruochen immediately fetched a pail of warm water. After bathing, he put on a clean suit and immediately went back into the internal space of the time and space spinel. While holding a brush pen in his hand, he smoothly drew a human figure on the scroll. Later, he drew the 36 meridians of the human figure according to his memory alone. The traveling routes for all of these meridians were different from one another. They had one thing in common though, the 36 meridians all gathered together in the qi pool in his glabella. The first time that Zhang Ruochen read through the first level of the scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean, he saw this very same graph of meridians on it without any explanation. It just could be self-perceived. The more superior level exercises one practiced, the more meridians he would open and the faster the running speed of genuine qi inside his body. The exercise methods for the inferior class of the human stage can only open up 7 of the meridians. According to the scripture of Emperor Ming's Empyrean, there are traveling routes for the 36 meridians. Each one will increase the practicing meridian and help strengthen the body of martial arts. If all 36 meridians are opened, could I even imagine how strong the body of martial arts would be? The word, realm, in yellow realm, referred to the specific extremity of the meridians. Zhang Ruochen had opened up only 33 meridians in his last lifetime. There were another 3 meridians that he had been unable to open up no matter how hard he tried. With just the 33 meridians having been opened up in his last lifetime, he was able to defeat his contemporaries. Even Empress Kai Yao, who was ranked number 1, opened up just 32 meridians, one less than he had. I've opened up 3 meridians now belonging to the mid-stage of the Yellow Realm. In order to break through to the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm, I'll have to open up at least 3 more meridians. Zhang Ruochen rolled up the graph of meridians and put it on the stone table. One had to first fill his chi pool with genuine chi if he wanted to reach the advanced stage of the Yellow Realm. If he practiced in the usual way, he would need 1.5 months to fill his body and his chi pool with genuine chi, even with the help of spiritual chi from the spiritual crystals. Zhang Ruochen could not wait that long, so he decided to take his energy pill. An energy pill was worth 1,000 silver coins. For ordinary warriors, it was a rare treasure. Even the younger children from medium-level families found it hard to get an energy pill. Zhang Ruochen had bought 10 at a time, by which his cultivation could be improved quickly. An energy pill was as small as a pearl and had a light scent. A plume of spiritual chi could be seen flowing on the surface of the pill with the naked eye. He put an energy pill in his mouth. A moment later, bang! The energy pill exploded inside his body and turned into a cloud of pill spirit, moving up and down inside of him. The 3 meridians took in the pill spirit at a fast speed. Traveling inside his body for a large circle, gathering vital energy, the pill spirit then turned into genuine chi and then was stored in the chi pool. Although Zhang Ruochen tried his best to absorb the pill spirit, there was still 70% that ran out of his pores, which meant that he took in only 30% of the pill spirit of the energy pill. He had spent all day to transform that 30% into his genuine chi. After refining all of that 30% pill spirit, the genuine chi in his chi pool doubled. I opened up only 3 meridians, so the transformation speed of the genuine chi is still too slow, as 70% of it is lost. If a warrior is in the Dawn state, the Yellow Realm, he can transform all of the pill spirit of the energy pill into genuine chi without any waste. Forget it. As long as I can make rapid progress with my cultivation, spending more silver coins is worth it. Based on the potency of the energy pill, I can fill my chi pool with genuine chi with only 4 more pills. Luckily, Zhang Ruochen now had plenty of silver coins and did not need to worry about money. Otherwise, he would be unwilling to buy even 1 energy pill with 1,000 silver coins. Instead of taking a second energy pill, he stopped his practice and went back to his room in the internal space of the time and space spinel. He had practiced inside the time and space spinel for more than 1 day, but in the outside world, only half a day had passed. It was just noon at the moment. Zhang Ruochen did not disturb Yun or concubine Lin. He fetched a bucket of warm water and took it back his room. He was not going to take a normal bath, but a medicated bath. For a warrior, practicing with only genuine chi was not enough. He also needed to practice his martial skills. Zhang Ruochen's physical health was weaker than his peers. If he wanted to make himself strong within a few months, he needed not only fighting practice but medicated baths as well. Zhang Ruochen bought 5 more portions of the refining powder, each of which cost 1,000 silver coins. He poured 1 portion of the refining powder into the barrel. Kai! A white smoke floated up from the barrel. Zhang Ruochen sat cross-legged in the center of the barrel. His head was submerged under the liquid. The liquid was as hot as boiling water and it bubbled up and released pockets of steam. A sharp pain shot across the surface of his skin. Later on, that sharp pain permeated into his flesh and blood, and then into his marrow and into his 5 internal organs. The burning pain ran through his body. If he were any other warrior, he could not possibly bear this pain and would have jumped out of the barrel. Zhang Ruochen was as solid as a rock, sitting cross-legged on the bottom of the barrel without any changes to his facial expression. He endured this pain of his flesh silently. Only by experiencing the most difficult hardships could one rise above the ordinary,